Avior Tobacco Tax Compliance demonstration. This product prepares and files signature-ready tax returns in PDF, EDI, XML, and CSV formats. We're going to go through in a detailed way each step of the process so that you can understand how our product works. So first we start off with your raw data. We will take the raw data as is and worry about creating the reports and formatting it ourselves. You don't need to worry about it. We can handle many business ERPs such as QuickBooks, Dynamics AX, Peachtree, and many more. So once we have your data with the correct amount of data and properly formatted, we'll have you create the reports and send us the files. Now to send us the files, there's two methods. There's the portal and what's called SFTP. I'll show that later. So through the portal, you'd go to our website at aviordata.com, log in, use your provided credentials, and go to Tax Compliance. Now this will allow you to attach all the different files that we create, and then you would hit submit to submit it to our engine and have the tax calculation run. However, the portal has two main restrictions. First is that the file types must be zip or CSV. And the second is that each individual file must be less than 8 megabytes. So for accounts where we have files that are larger than 8 megabytes or have different file formats than those two, we use what is called Secure File Transfer Protocol, or SFTP. And I'll show you how to do that now. So if we go back to our input files, I'm going to show this on a Mac first, because that's what I'm using right now, and then I'll show a similar way to do it on Windows as well. So on Mac, I'm going to SFTP into the, again, provided credentials. And once you're connected, if you put in the command, you're going to see drop off and pick up folders. These are for you to drop off your files and pick up the completed calculation. So we're going to go into drop off, and I'm going to take this zip file that I created over here. It just has all the files in it. I'm going to send that to the engine. So I'm going to put zip file, and it's going to upload it in the same way that we would do through the portal, but without the restrictions. So the engine's going to receive that file, run it, send you an email, and then drop off the files in the, or output the files in the pickup folder. So while that runs and we wait for the email, let's look at how we would handle this on Windows. So Windows doesn't have native SFTP support in the same way that Mac or Linux do. So you need to run a separate program. I'll log into the Windows machine. And here I've put in the same data that I had to SFTP in, but in a different UI. Here I'm using WinSCP. WinSCP is an open source and free downloadable application that allows you to SFTP in this way. So here you would just put in your login information in the same way that we would do before, and then you would be able to log in and see those same folders that pick up a drop-off folder and manipulate it in the same way. So while we still wait for the email to come in, the email is going to have a notification that it finished running, and it's going to have either warnings or errors. Errors are things that stop the engine from actually calculating anything and outputting the correct files. So these can be anything from a misnamed file, a missing file, or a wrong format. Basically, it wasn't able to start running, so it just stops, puts out an error, and outputs the email to you. So if that happens, you need to fix whatever is in the error, or we'll help you fix it, and then resubmit the files. Warnings are things that could be an issue, but are not necessarily going to cause a problem. Warnings are typically missing fields in the data, so different rows will have something missing, like let's say an address. And if there were no sales to that customer that month and it's not required for the filing, that's a warning that you could ignore. But some warnings will have things that leave out important information that will affect the tax outcome. Anytime there are just warnings in an email, it means that the tax calculation completely finished running, but it might not be accurate. Whereas errors meaning it did not run at all. Now let's look at the email we received. So here's an example email, and this little PDF here is going to have our warnings or errors. So let's take a look at that for a second. So here we have a list of warnings, and like I said, it's saying X field is blank in this entry. And these are things that you want to review, but they are not things that necessarily mess up the calculation. So now that we know that it's run, let's go back to our SFTP, and we're going to go back to the two folders, and we're going to go into the pickup folder. Now we can get, I'm going to get the zip file that's produced. We're going to look at it on our local computer. So I'm going to move this file out of the input folder so we can look at it by itself. We're going to open it up. So this will create two folders, a data folder and a jurisdiction folder. The data folder is going to have the supporting data that is used to generate the return. This data is what auditors look at to compare the actual return versus the data that we received. This data also contains items itemized into purchases, sales, or inventory. This folder can also contain what we call human readable files, which are files that are generated in case certain file formats are tough to read normally and parse, that we have something that we can look at and just immediately see everything labeled and what the amounts go up to. Now let's go back and look at the jurisdiction folder. So this folder has all the jurisdictions that you're filing for, and this contains all the returns that are ready to file. So for instance, in Texas, we have multiple different file types that we need to generate. The PDFs, we'll show an example of one of those. Since this is an example run of the information, there's pretty much all zeros. But this would be all the information filled out for what you gave us. So these PDFs would be ready to be filed, and in Texas's case, printed out, signed, and paper filed. We also generate CSVs for OTP, cigars, and XLS to show the exact format of what we're turning in on the online portal. Let's look at another example. Kansas, for instance, requires various CSVs for their schedules. So for instance, we'll open up this one. And again, this is a zero filing, just because it's an example. But we would have all these things filled out so that all you have to do is log in to Kansas's portal, enter these returns that are ready, and all of them will be correctly filled out and have all the correct data. No extra work required. So let's recap. We set up your raw input for our engine. We set you up with credentials to log in and submit your data to us each filing period. The engine runs the data, sends you an email of any errors or warnings that we need to look at. And then you pick up the completed zip folder that has this data and jurisdiction folders that has all of your returns and in addition, additional information that you need. And that's how the process works.